Thank you everyone for attending today's panel. We're joined by 4 amazing speakers today, some from No Tech for Apartheid and also a Berkeley EECS alumni. So the purpose of this panel is we wanted to show that resisting apartheid and genocide from within the tech industry is possible, actionable, and has already happened. But before I get into the questions, I'll let the speakers briefly introduce themselves. Please state your name, where you worked or formerly worked, and your organization and political involvement.
Hello everyone, my name is Mark Dudley. I'm a former Google worker and an organizer with No Tech for Apartheid. Pronouns he, him.
Hello, I'm she, her pronouns. I currently work for a just like B2B SaaS startup. Currently working there and just have like done some stuff there that I figured you all would be interested in. I graduated the EECS undergrad program back in 2018 or so it's been a little while.
Hey, my name's John, he, him pronouns. I am a current Googler, soon to be ex-Googler. I work at DeepMind, and I am an organizer also with No Tech for Apartheid.
Hi, I'm Noor, she, her pronouns. I am also an organizer with No Tech for Apartheid and an ex-Googler as of a month ago.
Thank you so much. So for the first question, I just wanted to ask for context for those who may not know. What is the connection between Google and the ongoing genocide in Palestine? Are there any specific projects you want to mention, especially if there's like a personal connection?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what isn't Google involved with respect to this genocide at this point? We've seen a bunch of things through various news reports that Google is directly complicit in military contracts with the Israeli state, and with the Israeli state comes along the IDF and the military. Most recently, I think we saw Google get into the propaganda game with a $45 million contract that they signed with the Israeli government, essentially to push the narrative that there is no famine happening in Gaza, and if there is famine happening, that it is entirely the result of the poor decisions of the Palestinian people. Really kind of horrific and easily disprovable lies that are nevertheless repeated because, crass money speaks loudly. I don't know if my other...
Yeah, the specific big one is Project Nimbus, which is a $1.2 billion contract with Amazon and Google. What I want to highlight there is the narrative around that was that Google would say it's just with the Israeli government, we work with other governments. As time has gone on, we found out multiple things. One is that they were very insistent with this. 2 is they were advised not to take this because they were advised that this would violate human rights in the future. They pushed for it. They kind of tried to win this game. In a sense. And then the other thing I want to mention is that the contract requires any government group in Israel to use cloud services through Nimbus. So even when they said that this is just for the government, the military is also part of the government. The military is also required to use Nimbus cloud services.
Yes, and adding to all of that has been said, an additional part of the contract is that Google is not allowed to have oversight into what Israel is using our technology for. So that's particularly hard to hear as an employee. And as a GDM worker, I go to meetings and am in chat spaces that are closed to the rest of Google. I will only say things now that are publicly known. There was a Washington Post article with some leaked statements from Sergey Brin, who was questioning the UN's, he called the UN an anti-Semitic organization to discredit it, which is interesting because Google's human rights policies adhere to the UN guiding principles for business and corporate responsibility, which requires the due diligence that Project Nimbus explicitly prevents, right? So I've been in all hands after all hands where employees have asked questions about Nimbus. It's been going on for over 2 years now, and the responses are they range from nothing to nothing, right? No clear answers, lots of deflection, and it got to the point where. Actually, I'm going to not say that because that is technically not public knowledge. So, but that, I think you get the idea. There's a lot of worker silencing, and that's super hard as someone who works directly on Gemini.
To add on to this, Google has contracts with Lockheed Martin and Palantir. Through there, I don't think I need to explain the connection, but yeah.
And U.S. Border Patrol.
Yeah, thank you so much for explaining that. And kind of following up on that, how did No Tech for Apartheid begin, and what has it been able to accomplish? And what would you say, are there any specific strategies that are most effective when targeting like big tech companies?
I'll go first. I mean, I think ultimately, No Tech for Apartheid has accomplished what we've mostly accomplished right now is we've done a lot of awareness raising. I think that like one of the things that we encountered when we were first basically fighting back against this Nimbus contract, which the fight has started all the way back since Nota's founding back in like 2021 when the contract was signed, was this narrative that the company had that like, one, people didn't care about this. Two, this was a contract that was like not any different from any of the other contracts that we have with any of the nation states that Google ends up dealing business with. And three, that like even if it was different and even if the military was using it, they were still following the terms of service that we require all of the people who use our services to follow. And I think through a lot of like Nota research, through a lot of like work, we've been able to basically, through a bunch of different news reports, we've been able to see that a lot of those lies, a lot of those statements were in fact lies, right? The Nimbus project is not under the general terms of service. It is actually held under its own specific terms of service. We know that Elbit Systems and various other military contractors, which acts as wings of the IDF, are required by law, like by their governmental contracts, to use Nimbus. We know that Nimbus is being used to house a lot of surveillance data from the populations within like the Palestinian and West Bank Palestinian societies. And so I think that like there's been a lot of effort around Nota to counteract a lot of those narratives and to agitate workers and to provide workers an outlet where they can actually feel comfortable standing up to and pushing back against what Google's leadership is very desperately trying to kind of shove down our throats, with the end goal, obviously, of making all of this stuff, basically making all of this stuff normalized. And I think that what Nota is doing and what our real strength is right now is to push back against that and to remind people that this is not normal and this is not the company that we signed up to join. And to that end, I think also, base building, talking to our coworkers, and increasing the amount of people who are agitated and ready to take action. So,
I want to definitely add on to that great description that Mark said of Nota's activities. I'm far and away the most recent Nota member of these three here. And one thing that I was really amazed and inspired to see upon joining Nota is that, let me put it this way. I think there are at least two types of what people would call awareness raising. And one is kind of like, maybe you go for a really big social media following, which is really important. That's one way to get the word out there. But we all hate social media, right? And we forget every post that goes past our feeds. So that sort of thing is very passive and doesn't really set groups up for action, right? Instead, Nota is very focused on like person-to-person interactions and building trust with other workers, which is really, really important. It's literally the engine for both current and future action, right? So the things that we discuss a lot are strategies to keep that engine churning all the time and not letting it stop. And it's like a good virus. You want to spread the good virus person to person. If you can hit 2 other people and get them activated and so on and so forth, like we all know these in this room, how that works, right? So yeah, that was super activating to me when I joined the org, and credit to the existing node organizers for having that strategy.
Yeah, I want to add on to that, like the emphasis of collective action. Even the disruptions you see, like that are public, or you see somebody stand up against the company, that's still collective action. To make that like the most effective action you can, that requires so much planning behind the scenes. First prepping internally and then externally making sure it's out. One of the advice that I got was before you disrupt, make sure you're internally known, and that makes you a more effective disruptor. To be known, you have to talk to people, and Noda focuses on that. One other thing that became clear a long time ago is that executives really don't care. These tech companies that you're going up against, these are like the CEOs are billionaires. You're pretty much going up against the country, like at this point. They might not care, but your coworkers do. And your coworkers still have a conscience. And once you're able to take collective action, you are able to make change. And we've been able to see that in Noda's actions in the past. Different things have been able to be escalated internally because people were able to come as a group and take action.
I'm not in the report that, so.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving us that insight on collective action. And kind of going off of that too, what would you say are some of the challenges of activism in the tech industry? Like, how do you bring up Palestine and other issues in the workplace to your colleagues? And also some people have the sentiment of tech companies must not know what their products are being used for and therefore not responsible. Or why are you going after tech workers who are quote unquote just doing their jobs and don't know what's happening?
I'll go ahead and speak on a little bit of that since it's been so quiet thus far. You're probably wondering, what is this person doing up there? I'll provide my experience is that depending on the company, sometimes activism is harder or easier. So some companies, they kind of just view their product as like a money printing machine. And in that case, that can make it really challenging because your activism would disrupt the money-making machine and they're very inclined to shut that down for you. Whereas some other companies, maybe their product is already inclined towards some kind of like, maybe they serve immigrants or maybe they're in the education sector or, something along those lines. So activism there becomes a lot easier because everyone's values are already kind of aligned. So just from my experience.
Yeah, so there are multiple ways there were multiple challenges with this. Going off of that, each company is different and the access you have to organizing structure internally is different. Like Google has community spaces and because of that we're able to organize. But there are a lot of companies that are very like you only talk to your team and you really don't have access to anyone else. It's much harder to reach people there. The other part is some companies are all companies are profit focused, but some companies care about their image. Big tech cares about their image. A lot of tech workers, they're like Google shirts, Microsoft shirts, you've seen them around. It's part of your identity, and they sell this on campuses as well. Like to reach students, they're like, come be a Googler. Like the fact that that term exists alone should understand, like there's propaganda behind that. With that, you can kind of use that as leverage. Like if you're working at this company, if you have this image, if you're associated with this company, then you should care about that part. The one thing I want to address specifically is the question of like, why should we care? Like one of the biggest things with this is Google hides behind contracts. With this, they're like, this is a contract. This is not us. Like, how are we supposed to know is first one? We've addressed that question. It came out. They know for sure. They can't deny many things now. Now with the second part, even if they do know, they're like, it's not in our control. Like, this is just, we provided this. Like, we gave them a knife. How are we supposed to know that they were going to use to stab people? For this, there's like multiple ways. I think for this audience, I can say there are levels of like legal application here for, you can't just say you're following orders. I think everybody knows that. The labor that you do, you will be credited to that. For when you're talking in tech, that doesn't work that way. People still can disconnect themselves. And there I want to make a similarity to like content regulation. These companies have responsibility over making sure that their products are safe for children. There are laws against that. Or if they post something on search, for example, the best way I can say is like ask that tech worker, like say your information is on the internet, and whenever somebody looks you up, like that information is presented to them immediately and it's posing a danger to you and your family. Would you believe that the company is responsible to help you and handle this and that this is something that they should take care of? If you're able to understand that, if you're able to understand that there are situations where data is powerful, like the best example, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, you could just say, oh, that's just like people's interest data, but putting that data together, it affected elections in different countries. If you're able to understand the impact of that, then you should be able to understand that you cannot hide behind the contract, you cannot hide behind the fact that you gave them the tools and they used it that way. There are policies that were written, and they were written for a reason, so the companies also know this. With this, I think it's a very slow process once you start talking to tech workers. It's first getting them to care about it, then getting them to connect their labor to this, and then getting them to care that their labor is doing this. It takes months, and it takes time, and it takes a lot of political education to get there. Like talking to coworkers, even while I was leaving, everybody knew why I was leaving. It was a lot of like, oh, like I understand your conviction, I see what you're saying, but not yet applying it to themselves. The goal is over time, they slowly start transferring that into like, I'm also complicit in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think along with like the complicity and talking about like Google as a culture, I think that these contracts, and I think that the way Google treats these contracts and the fact that they've like repeatedly lied to coworkers also has a very corrosive effect. And I think that we see that in kind of the slippery slope that Google is engaged with, now taking military contracts, removing sort of their like desire to not build military-based AI tools, and finally, like, I mean, to things that are like probably pretty close to a lot of your guys' homes, their willingness to sort of turn over Berkeley student emails to the federal government without any warning, right? Like these are all symbols of what Google is trying to become. And the reason that they're trying to become that is because they feel that like tech workers as a sort of inherent organization are kind of at their lowest power relative to everyone else. And they're really trying to kind of push the envelope in order to take more and more risks and to make things worse and worse for everyone. So ultimately they can shovel more and more profits upstairs. So I think that like you can view these things contextually, and obviously I think everyone in this room probably understands why sort of watching a live stream genocide for 2 years has a corrosive effect on the social fabric that we exist within. But I think it also is an indicator, it is a bulwark that like things will get worse and the company will push harder and harder, and they will, you know, with every inch you give them, they're going to try to take a foot. With every foot, they're going to try to take a yard, right? And so ultimately, like, you need to find these places, you need to find these stop gaps, and you need to, talk to your coworkers, learn why they're hesitating, like learn what drives them, what keeps them at the company, what irritates them about the company. You find the friction that exists between the company and the person, because that's always going to exist, right? That always exists whenever you have someone telling you to do something that you don't necessarily want to just do. And you have to find a way to tie that back into everything else.
Do we have time to add one more thing?
I don't. It's fine.
Okay. Sorry, real quickly. For the other challenges, we're working at the company that is now doing surveillance. So if you're trying to organize, there's the additional layer that they're really good at technology. So you have to be better than that. You have to make sure that you understand what digital privacy is. And the other thing is, doxing is a big thing, especially in tech. It's so ingrained within that the doxing group is very organized. You just need to out-organize them and make sure you protect all your members.
Yeah, and what Nora's saying is not hypothetical. I was tabling last week in New York City with some flyers out. It was interesting because I had to leave the tabling early. The rest of my coworkers got approached by security at the end of our session. They didn't save my ID, so there was no way for security to know I was involved. The next day, I got pinged by security on chat. So the only logical conclusion is they use facial rec within campus. So that was a new one for me.
Yeah, like you said, it's pretty hard when you're going against such a big power, but kind of like wanted to hear about your personal experience, like what motivated you personally to take political action in your workplace. Are there actions that you needed to or still need to build courage to take? Like, for example, is it difficult to let go of job security, like legal risks, etc.? And what helped you hold tightly to your convictions? Are there people or experiences that motivate you to keep escalating for Palestine?
Yeah, sure. I'll try answering a lot of that. What keeps me going for the fight for Palestine? My girlfriend helped organize this panel, I think, at some point, one way or another. Hi, Ellen. She's watching on the live stream, so I'm waving to the phone, not someone behind the phone. And in terms of, I will concede that at my workplace, the subject of Palestine has not really come up yet, and there's a lot of moving pieces we're still kind of working on to make that happen. But I can answer a little bit of the first part that I've already forgotten, which is how did I get involved in some kind of workplace activism, which was that this year under this administration, there's a lot of threats against the transgender population that lives in this country, and that's not really nice. And at our workplace, we're like, hey, we should have some kind of protection so that we don't, just suddenly get let go or something. That would be really nice to have. So we started fighting and pushing for this idea of hey, can we get some more, I don't know, a public statement from the company to say we're not going to fire our transgender employees, or oh, can we get XYZ things that we're looking for? And as we were doing that, we started advocating for other things too. We're okay, well, we're already advocating for gender minorities. Why not racial minorities? What about people that could be targets of ICE in these times? So that just kind of snowballed from there. So that's kind of how I got involved.
Answering the personal side of that question, it just makes me physically sick to see to know about the link between the tech that I'm producing and what we can all see every single day is being done to Palestinians. And as a Googler, it's even worse because we have access to infinite food and free infinite healthcare, best in the world. And I'll just add, there's an aesthetic to the offices that is just fastest in nature. We have imagery of nature up on AI generated nature up to keep us happy while we're working and not asking questions. So pretty much every day I go in, it's just emotional pings from all directions. And yeah, that's basically been going on since October 7th. How I got involved, I heard about NOTA through the sit-in that they did, which Mark was a part of. And that was extremely eye-opening for me to see that I had no knowledge of NOTA. I heard about it through the news at first, and then 3 hours later I heard about it through my inbox on Corp, right? Reached out to NOTA within a month or two because I saw some flyers after that. But I think the intake was weird at that point because 50 people had just gotten fired, right? And there was a lot of, I'm hearing about this from Mark and others who were around at the time, but there was a lot of uncertainty after that event. But yeah, so that's what led me to NOTA. And final thing, what keeps me going is I really think Palestine is a linchpin issue for a lot of things. Primarily respect for international law and business guidelines. And our country is not following international law, both administrations, current and the last one. And our company is also not following their own guidelines and respecting international law. And if we can push for the Palestinian people, it also frees us because of all of that. So that's really what keeps me going.
It's I can talk about the personal story of how I got to NOTA because I also heard about it first through a friend and then it didn't happen right away after. I think for a lot of people who watched what happened the last 2 years, you're in a free state. Like, the world is crumbling and you're going into your 9 to 5. You can't really do anything is what you think. And you continue each day that way, and it's insufferable. Like, there are people who be like, oh, like, look away, protect your mental health. You can't. Like, it's very simple. Like, everybody does not have that option. And I think as human beings, like, we're responsible for others. Then when I started getting involved with NODA, like, it was kind of just, they had calls and I joined because I was interested. They got to a point where, like, they were giving me stuff to do and I was taking action. Once you start taking action, you realize, like, a weight kind of has been lifted. Once you're able to start moving, you build momentum and you're able to give a response. And every single day, you're doing something to fight against this. And I think that's part of it. Even if you don't think what you're doing is that impactful, even if you truly don't believe from the bottom of your heart that it's going to do anything, that still kind of gets the part where, as a human being, I have a duty to respond and I'm responding. That's what I realized, and that's kind of what I tell anyone who joins NODA newly. If you feel like you're in a free state, like, truly see once you get involved how you feel about it after. The one other thing I want to add is, like, for Palestine, like, for me, since I was a kid, it's always been an issue that's been discussed in my household. It's always been something that we fight for. It became actually horrifying finding out that what I'm doing at work is connected to this in any way. I was not connected to Project Nimbus. I truly don't think I have, like, even a slight connection to it. The project I was on is not even tools. Like, once you start connecting that, I could not see it in any other way that Google is manufacturing the weapons that are killing people in Palestine right now. That starts weighing on you. Like, I made a joke that once you join NODA, you kind of have a timer where it's going to slowly start weighing on you more and more each day, that, like, the time you have left at that company is running out. The other part of this that I want to add is this has been a live stream genocide. For the people that had been murdered, we have their stories. Like, there were people that I was watching by name that I know, and I saw their story for the last, like, year, and then one day they just disappeared. And I also know how they died. That's not something that you can truly look away from. It becomes something that's a personal connection to everyone. It kind of opens your eyes that liberation is required for everyone in order to have liberation for one. Like you said, if they can come for one group, they can come for all. And I think once you realize and make that connection, I could argue that out of selfishness, you should be fighting for everyone else.
I don't have too much more to add beyond that, but I would also say that, like, the thing that keeps me involved with NODA is the same thing that we talked about as, like, one of the reasons, like, what we're doing at NODA, which is the relationships that we build. Because I think one of the things that is, like, often forgotten, especially because, like, in tech, Israel has such an outsized influence because it is kind of one of the large tech hubs of the world, that, like, there are also colleagues of ours, and there are also there are colleagues of ours who are also Palestinian, who have also lost family. And these are people that I have talked to, like, extensively sometimes. And so, like, I think the relationships that I have formed talking to people who are either personally affected by this or are just feeling the same way as I am and feeling sort of fucking crazy, because you do not see within the media that we exist in, within, like, the kind of workplaces that, I'm sure you guys feel similarly within, like, school. You do not see the reality reflected by, like, the way that everyone is just kind of moving around as if everything is just fine, while we know that there are all these people, hundreds of thousands, millions of people being starved halfway across the world because our government allows it, essentially. It's kind of maddening. But yeah, I would say that, like, relationships I think are the thing that transmute that despair into, like, a desire to actually do something to fix it, to better stuff.
Can we have a few more minutes on this one? Do you mind? There was a part of the original question that maybe I missed it, but I don't think any of us spoke to, which is, like, how do you deal with the fact that, like, you do have a job, you have a salary, but you also can't work on something that enables genocide. So my position right now is interesting because I got directly involved with NODA after I had already had a job lined up 6 months later. I can say more about this if anyone wants to ask me about it later. I won't go into it. But that I will be starting that job in a month. So I did not have the same, I guess, fear about this that other people might if they are thinking about getting into activism as an employee of Google or any other company that's in the supply chain for genocide. So what I did instead is I resolved to basically be as risky as I could before I left. And instead, trying to put myself out there, and especially as a GDM employee, Nota has very few GDM members. So I've been doing a lot of interfacing with other GDM members, right? But at the same time, I have this regret that, I didn't come to this mentality that other Nota members shared with me that you don't have to just leave because you feel complicit or you feel guilty. You can actually stay and organize, right? So part of me feels a missed opportunity to stay around. But I'm taking advantage of the silver lining, which is that I have less risk and therefore more ability to do risky stuff. And Mark, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you had a very different exit from Google. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah. So I was fired from Google. I did not get to exit quietly into the night. But yeah, how did I deal with the firing? I was fortunate. I had been in tech for a very long time. And so I had a sizable amount of money in my bank account. And so I wasn't as worried about, getting fired. I wasn't necessarily as worried about the retaliation. But I know a lot of the folks who are with us, a lot of them were, younger and maybe in a more precarious position. And I think ultimately, it is reasonable and it is understandable that people are frightened of losing their job and that people need these kinds of jobs, especially folks who are, supporting their family or have to pay off extraordinarily large amounts of debt. And so I think that ultimately, one of the things that's most important is that, your job is ultimately not necessarily the only, it's not necessarily something you should view as a moral stain on your person, right? This is the shackles of the society that we live in, that you need a job and you need money to do this sort of work. And ultimately, I think that the problem is not necessarily that you have a job at Google. The problem is that your job at Google is making you do these horrible things. And the goal should not necessarily be to leave Google. That's a personal choice that one can make. It should be to make the job that you have one that aligns more closely with your values. And, the way that you should manage that is through coordinated power of labor and of you and your coworkers banding together. So anything else anyone would like to add?
Yeah, thank you so much everyone for sharing. There's kind of this widespread myth that the tech industry is apolitical. So why is it important to you to organize as a tech worker from inside the industry and not just outside of your job?
Yeah, I'll speak on this one really quickly because it's something that I've thought a lot about. I think that there's this idea that tech is non-political, that we are folks who are interested in, solving technical problems, who are interested in solving things and fixing things and making things work. And I think that is a great, I think that desire is really exciting and really energizing. And I think that it is a great feeling to have something fixed or to watch something function really nicely. But I think too often, the way in which we are focused is to focus too narrowly on the small problem in front of us, when in reality there are these much more intricate, much more interesting problems that exist beyond that exist that our various companies or our various projects are just one cog of. And I think that it is I would say that my interest is kind of trying to turn some of that energy towards the larger, more complex problems that are maybe a little less straightforward in how they solve them. And I would say that one of the things that I try to do, and there are a lot of, obviously I'm not the only one. I think the fact that there's this chat is happening, the fact that there are so many people in this room is proof that there is a desire for there to be a different way of being a tech worker. I've been in the Bay for a long time. I've been in the Bay for like, at this point, 11 years. And I think that there's this idea of like what it means to be a tech worker, you know, like hustle and grind mindset, money mentality, like tech bro, Patagonia vests, whatever. And I really just want to carve out space for like there to be a different way, there to be a different way for you to be a tech worker in your communities and for you to like interface with your communities in a way that is much more, I think, ultimately like healthy. So
I'm going to add on to that answer of why it's important to organize in your workplace as opposed to outside of it. I will also add it's important to organize outside of your workplace too. There are certain things you can do outside of a work environment that maybe aligns closer to what you want. Maybe it's easier to organize. The context is different. But it's also important to organize in your workplace because you get to work in tech. You know how many people would want to work in tech and do things in the belly of the beast? Like you get that opportunity to do that. And you get to make money off of that. Isn't that crazy? So I think that it's really important to do that because you are in a position where you have a lot of leverage, a lot of power, and you can start organizing from there. And I think that's worth pursuing.
I don't know where to start in response to this question because there are just too many intersecting things I could say. So hopefully this doesn't sound too scattered. But I feel like the word politics has been weaponized to stop us from thinking about human rights and things that are just not political, right? The ability to forget politics is a privilege, and a lot of tech workers, all tech workers, full-time employees of Google have that privilege, right? So this ties all the way back to like one of the first questions about like what is it like to work in tech and people just doing their jobs, right? So like the mentality of just doing my job is like kind of a mirror image of this like don't discuss politics at work. They go hand in hand. It's been really, really frustrating to me to see how many of my fellow researchers adopt this mindset. And I think in Google Research and Google DeepMind, the mindset is more widespread because we love our research. Everyone in this room loves studying computer science and related fields. We love the math. We love to solve problems and be creative, and we like to see it work, right? But that kind of stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? When we create those things, we live in the real world and they get used by real people, right? And so it's propaganda in itself, both at the level of a single company and at the level of this whole country for decades, to say don't discuss politics at the dinner table. That's propaganda. Work-life balance, as important as that is also part of this propaganda because you're separating your work from your life, which is your values, right? Yeah, I guess long story short, it's a total, like, I feel like I'm living in the Matrix sometimes when I think about this stuff, right? But the only way to beat that is to talk to your coworkers and try to see how they feel about the same thing.
I'm gonna do both. Is tech political? And then also like your coworkers, like from a person perspective. Every industry is political, and the examples that I can give, healthcare is a very obvious one, especially in this country, both as a system and like the biases in it. But one that came about is like during COVID, I forget the term that they used to describe people, but people working in like grocery stores were still required to go into work. That was a political decision made at the time. Those were people that were risking their lives during that time. Nobody would think to be like, oh, like working as a cashier is political. Everything is interconnected. And like what John is saying, it's about like human rights and making sure that you are keeping that in mind. Tech specifically, I think we live right now in an era that it's very clear. To take a shot at Google right now, especially with their recent ad contract, when the famine reached level 5 by the IPC, if you searched Gaza famine IPC, Google would give you an ad that denies the validity of the IPC. That is political, and that is the effect that we're seeing right now. That is something that tech is doing that's very simple. Beyond that, like global warming, the impact that AI has on that, we can see that there are consequences to what tech decides to work on. So from there, every industry can be connected to politics. I urge you to think about it and try. The second part is the hardest part of tech, and talking to your coworkers, is a lot of them will seem apolitical. And a lot of it, I would say, might come from ignorance, but there's a portion of it that comes from privilege. A lot of tech workers are not fighting for bread and butter issues. They're paid very, very well. It's very, very hard for them to kind of even empathize or think about it, because it's very far from them. So with that and understanding that, that's where we focus our political education, making sure that someone who's not concerned about where their next meal is coming from understands the severity of being someone who is concerned about where their next meal is coming from. I think especially in the Bay, a lot of people are even like not aware of what's happening in Palestine just in general. It's very disencouraging, but understand that this is coming from the bubble that they're in, and it's coming from like it's our job to burst that bubble in a sense. Everything is political. A lot of organizing is about political training and education. It's also about like our own political training and education. Like a lot of views that I have developed in the last 5 years of my life have changed like who I am as a person today and the way I see the world. And as we have more people know Tech for Apartheid, everyone's coming from a different starting point. And it's slowly getting that education, getting them to realize how everything is connected to each other.
Yes, and kind of our final prepared question before we open it to audience Q&A. This is kind of a call to action for everyone in this room. What is your advice for STEM students who want to resist making technology for apartheid? And this may be helpful for our students that aspire to be in the tech industry. Does what you're doing right now look different from what you imagined in undergrad? And how does that feel?
I think of the panel, my undergraduate was the longest time ago, so I don't actually remember all that well what I imagined. But I would say that I'll keep this very quick. My suggestion for you is, really think about what you want to get out of the job that you take, and regardless of the job that you end up getting, organize it, meet other people who are interested, talk to other people, keep pushing and try and find and build power where you can at the points where you have the most leverage, which is, for most of us, our job. So, yeah.
Sorry, I'm mid-answer in my head. I'm going to pass this along.
Let's see. Yeah, I did a math major in undergrad, statistics, ML, PhD, went straight to Google. At this point, I can say with confidence that Google has basically killed my passion for computer science research. My next job will not be a research job. It's a little unfair because honestly, the entire industry has killed my passion for it, right? Seeing what computer science research is being used for, there's almost no ethical outlet for it. And that doesn't mean all labs doing computer science research are bad. In fact, if you just count them, the majority of them are probably filled with extremely ethical people who are extremely concerned about this same stuff. And they're working on very good projects, but those projects are not well funded anymore. There used to be so much good research into the intersections of computers and society and HCI work. A lot of my research was pointed in that direction, and I will always love the subject, and I will keep reading papers. And I think Michael Jordan wrote a great paper recently about a lot of the current challenges, and basically saying all research into LLM scaling and architecture is not interesting right now. The interesting thing is how LLMs intersect with humans and the information they get and what that causes them to do. And these are rich research topics that we should be focused on, and we're not because of capitalism. Okay, that's that.
Yes, I'm also going to try to formulate my thoughts while I think. But I interned at Google 2 times while I was in college. That was the dream internship. That was the dream job. I was so happy the day I got it. I was so excited when I did my internship. I was wearing Google shirts. It's that level. And then I started working. That ended up being the first job out of college. I think where John and I are at right now, considering I just quit like as a month ago and he's about to end it, we've had both lost our passion and love. Like I truly did love engineering. I loved what I did. I loved problem solving. I liked tech. It got to a point where I could not do my work. Like I'm so disinterested that I can't sit down and even think about like being a software engineer in the future. That is, I think, also conditioned on the fact that like we just are getting out of this. I would say one thing I want to highlight is the one thing I kept on hearing as I'm leaving is like this is the same issue everywhere you go. I think that's where like the next generation of people working in tech come into play. Having alternatives is not something that exists right now. And I think if you are building something new and you focus it around ethical issues like this, there is a future that is bright and the future that we need people in tech. There are groups like, I forget, Tech for Palestine, I think, that have projects that all include technology that we need. This is not something that we should be completely removed from. The way that we understand like how AI is impacting the world right now comes because we have people who understand AI and people who are working on this. There is the issue that once you start realizing how involved you are, it's very hard to get involved. So now that you're at a position where you're not in that deep and you still have the passion, I would say work towards building that future. There are a lot more people that care about this than you think. There is a loud minority, I would say, that believes in the fascist agenda just in general. People are more human than you think, and I would start there. And like one thing is, I'm still fairly new to organizing. If I had started in college, like I can't imagine where I'd be right now. So if you start on your campuses, the hope is you can bring this to wherever you go and use this as a principle as you continue.
Some final practical advice. Join Google and join NODA. Okay, just a plug. Right away, just reach out to us. The serious part of that advice is the truth is tech companies are just bloated with bureaucracy right now, and they just want to hire you and keep you from joining other companies, right? So you can go to these companies and make a living and work 20 hours a week and do something else with the rest of your time. And whether it's activism or whether it's working on with Tech for Palestine or working with groups that are working for internet freedom and working towards the internet as a public utility, all of these groups exist. Many of those folks are right here in the Bay Area, and that's what I would encourage you to think about.
All right, as someone that has not lost my passion for software engineering, this will be a very interesting answer. So I have two things I want to say. One regarding it's like all these companies are doing bad things. It's like what can we do? I'm going to use a humorous analogy here. You got to be a toxic lover. You got to look at the companies and be like, yeah, I can fix them. You know, like. You can join and you could start fixing from the inside. There's varying degrees of, what you have to accept, like you're willing to do or not willing to do. Maybe for example, you don't want to work at, OpenAI or something. And like, yeah, we all draw a line somewhere, but finding where you draw that line and what you find acceptable and what you're willing to live with, under the conditions, of course, of like you are organizing, you are doing something to make that company better because you are working there. They are making you a better engineer, and ideally you are making them a better workplace to be in and a place that aligns with your values. You, as a worker, get to have a say in where the company goes. So use that. Second thing I want to say is, practically speaking, organizing in a workplace. You guys all have like friends that people listen to. In a sense, I'm going to bring this example of like there are some people that draw in other people, right? Like people listen to what they say and they're likable and they have lots of friends. Find those people in whatever workplace you go to, be friends with them, so that you could just like say, oh gosh, the terrible things in Palestine, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, and then they'll just share it to everybody, right? Those are the levers and the fulcrums that you can use to make your organizing life a lot easier. So that's my advice.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time and for sharing your experiences and advice. But yeah, now I will open it up if anyone in the audience has questions. If you don't want to be in the live stream, you can like step to the side and then I can repeat your question.
I was curious, like, what wins have you seen or been a part of through your organizing?
Is that wins?
Yeah, wins.
No. Yeah, well, I would say that like the wins that we have right now are a lot of like informational wins. I would say that like I think people understand Google's complicity in a way that is like much deeper than they did like 3 or 4 years ago. I think we've knocked down a lot of pillars that Google was kind of using to hide themselves, to like distance themselves from the issue. You know, we now know that like Israel is not supposed to, it does not have to follow our own terms of service. We know that they are directly working with like Israeli government. We know that they are like directly complicit in the IDF. And we know that they were warned that they could possibly cause, that this contract could possibly cause human rights violations. And I think that like one of the biggest wins was, I don't know who here has seen like Francesca Albanese's report about like business complicity within the Palestinian genocide, but she like personally name checks Google among other big tech companies and talks about cloud technology as dual use. And so I think that like that is something that would not have happened had it not been for like not only folks organizing at Google, but folks organizing at Microsoft, at Amazon, at Cisco, and all of these other tech companies basically standing up and being like, hey, we're workers, we understand this, and this is what's happening. Yeah.
So the way those big, like, global scale level events happen it's rooted in organizations like NOTA. And like here is a very direct line that I was a part of. So Mark described.
I shared you in the city.
Yeah,
you already did.
Oh,
No, I just passed it to you.
Mark was in the sit-in, Thomas Kurian's office.
So we organized about 20, 30 other individual contributors to basically write into that answer like, no, I am not happy with leadership because XYZ things, right? And we just like sent that out. It was like an anonymous survey, so we felt safe enough to like send something out like that. And admittedly, it did take a little while for leadership to acknowledge that this survey results were really bad. You know, like it took a while for them to get around to that. But the wins from that were kind of big. Like we got, like a gender affirming care stipend, which was kind of big. It was just because I think not all gender affirming care is covered by insurance, you know. I think a couple of times in like all hands, they explicitly mentioned their next couple goals were DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging related, and they included that like in their slides and everything, which is like in this environment, that's kind of huge to like have that in like black and white, you know, ink and whatnot. So some of that is pretty big, and yeah, pretty good wins.
Okay, yeah, so just because we're at time, I wanted to plug our website that my comrade Abby made. It's really good. Please visit this website. There's a lot of resources that you can look into, a lot of tangible projects you can participate in. There's also like a Notion page of a lot of articles that contain like evidence, like hard evidence of companies' complicity. So yeah, and also there's our interest forum. Please join us if you're interested, or talk to one of us after this event. But yeah, anyways, are there any live stream questions? Or? Does anyone else have questions?
How do you go about like starting a conversation with someone in the workplace if they identify as like apolitical?
had many such conversations. That's a good question, and my immediate, very cop-out answer is it really depends on the person, and you have to. So I usually start by not talking about politics, if that makes any sense, right? Like, and this has actually been effective. Like, suddenly I'm talking to them about their life, and I'm thinking of a close teammate, and I had this conversation just last week, you know, and we talk about life a lot. We've had a lot of philosophical conversations in the past, and it's been weird with this guy. Like, I always got to a point where, like, I realized we were disagreeing, but I couldn't figure out why, you know. And then this time we got to a point where he expressed something like, well, you know, if I'm at a company that builds guns and, like, someone goes and shoots up the school, like, how am I responsible, right? And I'm like, well, picture this. What if you're at, like, a massive gun manufacturer and, like, they have a contract with, you know, I use the example ISIS because it's very, like, easily grabbable to someone who lived through the war on terror, right? And he's like, it kind of gave him pause, right? He's like, okay, I see how that's different, right? And I'm like, yeah, and I gave him, like, a little wink nudge, like, might relate to something that's happening right now. And he's like, okay, yeah, right. So I think the mindset I'm always in those conversations is I'm not trying to convince anyone on the spot. I'm just trying to, like, ask the right questions, and, like, because you're never going to convince anyone on the spot, right? Like, the goal is to give them a memory of a conversation they had with someone who wasn't judging them, who was just asking them about their life, and then they happened to go to a spot that was, like, more meaningful and more, like, about personal values. So I've had many such conversations like that, but that's one that stood out because it was recent.
To add on to this, empathy and sympathy is something that's contagious. If you care enough, that builds care around you just in general. One of the big things that I was told as I left was, like, I understand that this is a close issue to you. I understand you care a lot about this issue, was, like, the statements that would start, which drove me insane partially because I was like, how is this not an issue that's important to you? But the follow-up to that was like, can you tell me more? Like, they want to understand why you care so much. So if you're able to show that not only do you care, but enough that you're willing to take action, people will start questioning, like, why is this person there? The other part, it applies to some people and not, but like, I'm someone who wears a hijab, and there are consequences to political decisions that are made. This is something that directly impacts me, and I have stories associated with this. A lot of people who are apolitical are in a bubble, and until they see it happening to someone that they care about and something that happens in front of them, they won't understand why people care so much. So a lot of this is, like, personal connection one-on-one, which is why we emphasize, like, talking to people one-on-one. But the biggest thing I want to say is, if you care enough and if you care loudly, it builds care around you, even with people who are apolitical.
It's also worth saying, you don't have to be on good terms with, like, everybody. You know, if they're looking really apolitical and they're just not vibing with you, that's okay, you know? Part of, there's, like, a statistic number of, like, what percentage in a group do you need to convince or to, like, get stuff done, make things happen? The number is surprisingly low. It's, like, within, like, around, like, 5 or 10%. Maybe some numbers even go to, like, 3%. Like, you really don't need, like, 50% or something. This is not, like, I don't know, an election or something. So going with that, you just need to find, like, really solid connections with a handful of people that you really vibe with. And I mean, it's worth taking some time to, like, go through a couple people that you maybe don't have a good sense of. Like, maybe they are kind of apolitical, but you're like, maybe there's something there, you know, you do a little digging. And if nothing comes up, nothing comes up. But it's really good to, like, find some common ground and see, like, hey, what is their life about? You know, maybe you might be surprised what some people are like. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess my last point with this is much like how we talked about earlier, how Nora brought up that, like, every job is political, every person is also political, right? Like, no one is truly apolitical. No one exists truly in this, like, you know, enlightened Plato cave style bubble, right? And so that's why you got to talk with people. That's why you got to bring these things up. You got to figure out where they are political. You got to figure out the things that affect them. You've got to figure out where there is friction. And then the idea is tying that friction back to like the overall larger existence that we are fighting back against, right? You got to figure out the ways in which that friction is being made manifest by like the larger problems within the systems that we are currently trying to push back against. Yeah, that would be my suggestion. Talk to people and talk a lot. And again, yeah, every conversation, you're not trying to convince them of anything. You're just trying to listen, and you're trying to figure out, like, you know, you're trying to build relationship and rapport.
Yeah, and no one really asked, but kind of adding on, one of my professors said that if someone claims that they have no politics, it means that their politics match the status quo. So that's kind of relevant to what you're saying. But yeah.
I just wanted to say I've been facing a lot, or experiencing a lot of disillusionment about like pursuing like a career in tech, and then also like talking to my peers, like and like realizing how many live in their own bubble, right? Like even being like a student in like computer science, like at Berkeley, like the majority of like those students come from like backgrounds that have enabled them to kind of get this far. Like it's really hard to kind of like it feels like you're kind of like very alienated in that sense. And so I just wanted to say what you all have been talking about, like what you said about empathy, like empathy is contagious, and like having a concern and talking about this, it's contagious, like it makes people think, like that's really, really helpful for me. And then another thing, like when you were talking about wins and how organizing has kind of like drawn people's attention to, it's drawn like news attention to like texts like complicity and genocide. Like I wanted to add on that here, like in our data ethics class, which like I think 400 people, like students take that class like every semester. They talk about no tech for apartheid and a couple of other like organizing like movements, and like they talk about how like organizing in the tech workspace, it's tech workspace culture doesn't really have a culture of like unionization, and they kind of like talk about how like it's important to do that in your workspace. So like just know like your organizing also has this effect. Like here, yeah.
Okay, I do want to respect the panelists' time because it is almost 8 p.m. But yeah, would you guys be willing to stay behind and like maybe if people want to come up to you and
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, no problem.
yeah. So yeah. But yeah, really appreciate you taking the time today to talk to all of us. I personally learned a lot, and I really hope that everyone learned a lot too. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming as well.